everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Marketing Inc. I'm your host, Allie Bloyd, and I have a very special guest with me today, Doug Brown. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Allie. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Doug, before we dive in, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your story? You have a very impressive resume, and I'd love for them to really hear the experience and the different path that has taken you to this point in your life.
Sure. I started working at the age of 3 for my father's business, and I was sweeping floors and making 25 cents US a week. That was
Wow.
it may not sound like a lot of money, but I mean back then you could buy a lot of candy for a penny. So
Absolutely.
I I was the most popular kid on Candy Day. My friends used to come down. We used to go down to the store and celebrate, right? So, and a key thing that a lot of people in business don't do is celebrate. So by the age of 6, my dad actually had thrust us in front of clients to actually start talking to them and literally selling. So we would take orders, we would do things. Now, I don't know if this was, child labor or if this was a plan by my father. I never got a chance to ask him before he passed away. However, I learned a lot of things in business just from doing that and working with my dad over the first 18 years of my life, which led on to me trying to figure out what I wanted to do with life. Because what I realized is, okay, I'm entrepreneurial, but I never knew what an entrepreneur was because I grew up in it just as a family business. And I learned bad habits and I learned good habits. I learned bad habits about how to build a business on your back. I learned bad habits like you don't necessarily, a lot of people don't have outbound efforts. My father had an incoming business and he was an expert in that field. And that was something, but as soon as we started putting outbound efforts to the business, I learned, man, how fast it can grow. I learned a lot of different things working with my dad. I'm very grateful for that. I went into the military on and off. I spent 12 years and 7 days in the military, the United States Army. And all the way through, I was going to college, trying to figure it out, because I thought I had to have a degree to actually be successful in life. And I'm not saying degrees are bad. I have 3 of them, but what I found in entrepreneurial life, it helps, but it's not the major reason why. So as I started going along and trying to figure out my way, I was always building these businesses on the side, and I had over 35 of them to my life to date.
Wow.
Yeah, well, not all were successful. I want everybody on the line to understand that, right? But many of them did okay, and a few of them did extremely well. So during one of those businesses, I ended up supporting a company called Coach University, and they said to me, "Geez, you should be a business coach." And honestly, I'd never even heard of one at that point. So I took that on to figure out how to be a business coach because I liked it. I was coaching people anyways. And I met a man and I helped his company called Jay Levinson, a book series called Guerrilla Marketing. And I did good things with Jay and for his company. And he introduced me to a man named Chet Holmes. Chet decided to give me a shot with his company. I ended up working with Chet's company as an independent, became their number 1 selling coach in the first 6 months. And then from there, I ended up becoming his president of training and sales. I worked with him for several years. And then a man named Tony Robbins came along and wanted in on the company. So I ended up becoming Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes, president of training and sales. And it's just kind of mushroomed out from there. I've worked with companies, big companies, Intuit, Proctor and Gamble, et cetera. Worked with thousands, if not tens of thousands of smaller businesses as well.
Wow, what a story. I mean, there's just so much in there, but one thing that really stood out to me is the fact that you have been doing this for your entire life. I personally think it's very smart for parents to get their kids in on business as early as possible, because it's not just about teaching them how to help you when they're ready, but that entrepreneurial mindset and the step-by-step plan that you had seen in terms of, if you want to make money, these are the things that you can do. I feel like that's so invaluable to young people. My story is kind of similar. I started working with my parents on their flip houses and rental properties, painting, doing all the disgusting work, in all honesty, but I loved it. And it really just showed me that I loved working with my hands and creating something that was worth more than what I had when I started with it. So I can definitely relate to that. As I told you before, Chet Holmes and The Ultimate Sales Machine, that is my favorite book of all time. I've read it so many times at this point. And the fact that, for those of you who don't know about Chet Holmes, to be the president of sales and training for Chet Holmes's company is huge, because that is what Chet Holmes was all about. And so putting his trust in you to handle such a massive responsibility within the company, I think that's absolutely amazing. I mean, you clearly are very, very good at what you do. And the fact that you understand what it's like to work with small businesses, local businesses, definitely something that I know our audience is going to be able to get a lot from you. So the first question I would have is, what did those sales responsibilities look like kind of in those early days when you talked about putting together an outbound strategy? I feel like that is something that a lot of our listeners currently do not have and don't really understand the power of. So could you go into a little bit about that?
Yeah. So an outbound strategy can, it's, there's two types of really, I'll say, people call it marketing. I call it prospecting, right?
Yeah.
There's direct response, where you do something to directly go out and get a response. And then there's branding. So, like what we're doing here, I would consider more branding, right? I can make an offer or whatever. You can make an offer, but for the most part, it'll be branding. People will listen to this. They'll go, wow, this guy's kind of smart, or Allie is extremely smart. And, I want to talk to them. So that's more of a brand thing, that will elicit a response. Television commercials on television, same thing, the perfume commercials, perfect example of branding, right?
Yeah.
They don't even make an offer.
Mm-hmm.
So, but for me, direct response. So the majority of our sales efforts must be in direct response, and branding still should be there because it's important, but you're going to pick up a smaller amount of clients from branding most until your brand becomes super huge, like, Oprah or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did, and what I did, I should say, because my father was an expert in the field that he was in, and but my dad really wasn't a sales uh, driver. My mother was, and so my mother. You mentioned things about when you're little. I used to ride around. My mother used to be a very successful Avon woman, and she was making more than my dad was actually selling Avon. And I remember when I was, just a little
Wow.
boy, I would go around and we'd drive around in the car and we'd get orders and we'd write up the receipts, and and I would help her fill all the bags with like little lipsticks and all kinds of stuff. Right. My favorite part of that whole thing was, though, is when she was calculating the commissions at the end for herself. Right. So,
Absolutely.
so so I took this concept and I said, okay, how do we go out and get business? Because frankly, my dad's business was one that supported a family, but just, he could have done extremely well. But he managed to, support multiple families. My family used to take in other families, and we did that for 20 years, basically.
Wow.
Um, and so the first thing I did was I realized my father had a huge database of people that he worked with over the years. And we never asked for referrals. Right? Not once. We had all these glowing reviews from people. So I started going back and asking for referrals. These are very simple things. And by the way, one of the things that a lot of small businesses just don't do is they don't ask for referrals. You know, and so you got to have a system on and around referrals. You can't just be passive about it. It can't be like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, hey, I'll ask whenever, they'll ask me whenever. It's got to be a system that you start and you just activate, put it active, proactive system in the business as you go along. The second thing I did is I used the power of networks. Now, the power of networks, some people call these joint ventures, some people, call these affiliate relationships, whatever you want to deem it, it's fine. But the bottom line is you're going out and you're recruiting other people to actually sell your products or services.
Mhm.
So we had different people. We had electricians, who we were not competing with. My dad had electric motor machinery repair company. So we
Gotcha.
repaired industrial equipment but commercial electricians, we could turn them into our sales force because
Mhm.
they're in the factories, they're in doing all this work. Um, I went out with some direct mail, for example, direct pitch. Hey, you send it into the CEO of a manufacturing company, and you try to elicit an appointment with this person. Now, it's kind of weird because I'm 15 years old. So now I'm going to meet with a CEO of a manufacturing company at 15 or 16 years old, right? I mean, come on in my office, kid. Well, I can't drive yet. I don't have my license, right? That type of thing. But the reality is we were able to do that because, my brothers would give me a ride or something would happen. So it's all about creating connection, and you've got to get exposure to create connection. That connection then leads to a rapport building process through communications, which leads to an outcome. That outcome should be win-win for both parties. And we have to be the person that's taking the reins and making the sleigh go in the direction we want, or our business will get stuck. And that's what we're seeing now, stuck or even worse, going back. And that's what
Yeah.
we're seeing now with the pandemic and everything. People were just going along status quo. They weren't expecting these unexpected things um, in their business, as well as, hey, we now have to have a bigger emphasis even on employee safety than we ever
Yeah.
had before. So those were three examples. We started adding more. One of the reasons I think I really related to Jay Levinson is he uses guerrilla marketing tactics, and that's what I was using because I didn't know any better. I
Yeah.
didn't even know, I didn't know about paid advertising. Um, I would also, here's another one for your audience. You can actually use your competitors to actually drive business into your business as long as it's complementary. So let's say you're a florist and you specialize in, this be a company up here called Johnson's Roses. When I was growing up, that's all they sold with roses.
Mhm.
But they didn't do, funeral arrangements and, all the floral type things, right? So you could use, even though Johnson's was selling roses in the other, and, another company selling roses, Johnson still had people who came in there and said, geez, you know what? I have a funeral that's coming up and I need somebody to do that. Well, if the florist was intelligent enough to be able to make the relationship with Johnson, even being a competitor, would refer business back to them. And then when the florist gets, hey, I need, 1,800 roses, and they can't stock that, they're going to now make a deal with Johnson to actually support it. So they're pushing business back and forth. You could do that in a respectful manner as long as you have good agreements with competitors.
Yeah. I mean, man, what powerful information you just shared. It is very interesting because I actually just finished a course on organic marketing, essentially ways that businesses can try and grow their sales right now without spending money on ads. And those are certainly several things that we cover. But the one thing I'd love to focus on a little bit to start is this concept of reaching out to these specific businesses in order to create mutually beneficial relationships, what some people may know as the Dream 100. So that's, originally when I heard about it from Chet Holmes, also Russel Brunson, who worked with Chet, he discusses the Dream 100 strategy quite frequently. And personally, it's had a huge impact on my own business. It's been one of the specific things that has grown my company the most by developing those strategic partnerships and those relationships. And I truly believe that most people think that it's more difficult than it is. But just listening to your story, you as someone who was 15 years old, who didn't have any like technical previous sales and marketing experience from a college, or, you learned this as you went, you learned this just by doing it. And so if anybody can take something away from that, it's that if he could do it at 15, you can absolutely do it too. But tell me a little bit about how you would go about creating this type of outreach strategy for a business who currently had never done it before. They had no contacts that they have really evaluated in terms of who they should be working for or working with. What are those steps that you would give them to kind of take this through to the end?
Okay, so they have no contacts or they have some contacts?
Well, they just don't really have any centralized plan of who they want to reach out to. Maybe they have consumer contacts and things like that, but they've
Okay.
never actually done this intentionally.
Okay. Uh, so first thing I'd say is Russell Brunson's a very smart guy. I remember
Definitely.
Russell coming through. We used to do these web trainings, and we teach these concepts in a web format and a live webinar, if you will, or
Hmm.
live masterclass. And Russell used to come through those trainings, and I remember when he was coming through the trainings. So smart guy. In regards to the Dream 100, or how to outreach, here's the thing: people make this too complicated because there's process, strategy, and then mindset, right? So the Dream 100 is a process. And so if we don't think about it too much, our mind won't get in the way of saying, hey, what if we get rejected here? Or hey, if we do this, how's it going to affect our brand? The reality is that most of the fears that people have in business never, ever are going to come true. Never. So when I was 15 years old, I mean, when you're 15, you don't think about life really. You're thinking
Yeah.
about, I'm thinking about, how do I get a date? That's my big deal. And I need
Hmm.
money to actually pay for this date to take someone out and show her a nice time, right?
Hmm.
So I'm thinking creatively because it's out of survival, right? It's out of how do I buy a better car so maybe I can get a better relationship and all these other things, right? These are the things that were going through my mind. Um, and it was fun. So you got to have fun. That's the first thing. You must have fun doing these things. So if you have like a contact database or not a contact database, you first thing you want to do is you want to figure out, okay, who's my targets for these things? So when you talk about a Dream 100, it's really 100 of the most desired targets that or contacts that you want to go after. And you can have segmented Dream 100s as well. So in other words, maybe I want to go after celebrities. Maybe I want to go after CEOs of a $50 million company. Maybe I want to go after, Chet used to talk about this thing he called the best buyers neighborhood strategy. So you look at a specific uh, geographic region or neighborhood. In his case, they all had $1 million up homes, and that was his target. So they had 1 million up at home. They had a certain, family size and different things. So you've got the first step is we got to get first step is you got to like truly decide and commit to it, because
Hmm.
this is not it's not a process that you just go, oh, I think I'll give it a try. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
This is a process over a longer period of time in which you're going to penetrate a certain segment of any type of market that you're looking for, and you're going to continuously go after these people uh, in any way possible to get attention. So first thing is decide, second thing commit, third thing is, okay, let's start making a target list. Once we start getting a target list, we get their contact information, then we must decide how are we going to contact these folks. Now, what we used to do with the Dream 100 is we used to go and get um, different small gifts, if you will. So you can go to places like Rhode Island Novelty or any novelty shop. Do not send expensive gifts. That's the key, right? So I have a small pair of like hockey skates that I could send, right, in the wintertime, for example, around here if I was doing something, you know, and we would talk, and I would ping it to the hockey. I would take something about those hockey skates and I would ping it to hockey, and I would say, hey, do you want to win the Stanley Cup in your business this year? Right. And I'd send hockey gear. So again, skates, a couple of dollars. They're not big, right? So you want to get together. We used to do these in what Chet called lumpy mail campaigns. And so what we would do is we target out a segment of what we wanted to go after. And again, you want to go after something that's going to give you a higher return. You're not looking to go after something that's going to give you a $3 return, because you'll spend more on the marketing effort than you will in the return. But we would send these gifts. And so the key is it's got to be a cadence. So when I work with larger companies, you're always talking about sales cadence, like, hey, we're going to do a 21-day sales cadence. Same thing here. So what we do is we create little creative messages, like let's say I don't know, you're a financial planner. You could send a beach ball, and not inflated, deflated beach ball. Send the beach ball. You have a little message. Have a ball at the beach. When you retire, right? And that's what the financial advisor when this out to the potential multi-million dollar clients because that's what they're looking for. And you're going to keep sending these things. Now, the key is to alternate between what you send and then following up with phone calls or following up with a text message or following up with an email.
Mhm.
And the whole idea of the Dream 100 is to go from a place where, who are you? That's what the person's thinking. Like, who's sending me this in the mail? Why are they sending this to me in the mail? Oh, okay, I get that. And then to, oh, okay, I now know who this person is because I continuously building the relationship to, maybe I do have a need. Maybe I should call this person. Well, I'm not ready yet. Oh, you know what? I really do have a need. And now the need is this. Let me. So now what happens is by the time you contact them on phone or they contact you, you're no longer in a place where you're a cold
Mhm.
market, if you will. And that's the key behind the Dream 100 is to entertain them as you go through and have consistent, constant follow up throughout the process. And statistically, when you do it 100, many companies reported back. So statistically, about 20% of those targets you will get.
Mhm.
So, I mean, think about it though. If you're going after $1 million sale and you go after 100 of them and you do 20 of them, you're making $20 million in sales annually off those clients.
That to me is one of the single best things that if I were a local business owner that was hard up for cash right now or had seen a significant decrease in their revenue over the last 6 months or so, this doesn't have to be super expensive. He's talking about low cost items. This to me is more about, like you said, committing to it, making sure you understand the impact that getting these clients could have on your business, and also being willing to be persistent, persevere, and have that long term endurance in mind because it may not happen overnight. And usually it's not going to. But this is the same exact type of thing that we really see with our paid advertising. You've got to have a certain amount of touch points before people feel comfortable enough to buy from you. And just because they see your ad today and maybe they engage with it, well, yeah, they have an interest, but it doesn't mean that need is there. However, business relationships change all the time. Somebody could really screw up an order for this business and they're kind of frustrated and now they become a lot more open to these different options of people that they could work with instead. So, really understanding that this is not an instant gratification thing, but that it also can happen a lot faster than you think. For me personally, I was just sharing with my students one of the stories of kind of the snowball effect that's happened in my business. And one of the very first really large opportunities that I got, it was on our first one-on-one conversation. Then the opportunity actually happened about a month and a half later. That produced a huge amount of sales very quickly. It was not a really long-term thing. But then others have taken 6 months. It really just kind of depends on who this person is, what it is you're really looking for, and where they currently are in their, either awareness levels of what you do or really their direct needs. So this is something that can be affordable. So if you're not doing this, there really shouldn't be an excuse for the financials to hold you back, in my personal opinion. So do you have any examples of maybe deals that have been won through this type of strategy that really stand out to you, or maybe a specific campaign outside of the skates that you really have felt like just did very, very well compared to some of the others?
Yeah, absolutely. I have hundreds of them over the years.
I'm
So that's,
sure.
I, I just had one happen with one of my clients. I mean, now see with the Dream 100, remember I said you can segment. You don't have to necessarily go after direct clients.
Hmm.
But I had a client, I have a client still today. I just finished up some work for them. That when I began with them, they were doing about 3.5 million or so. And then after our first run together, they went from 3.5 million to 6. And then I hadn't talked with them for a little bit. And I called them up and I said, hey, I'm going to be in your area. Can we have lunch? So we sat down, we had lunch. And we talked about this exact concept. And so these folks sell what they call wireless optimization services. So they look at phone bills for companies, and then they restructure their wireless service and bring their bill down. And in the meantime, give them managed services. And so when we were sitting there talking, I said, "Geez, guys, you should really consider getting an agent program together," because they didn't have one. There was the same thing I did with my dad's, right, with the
Hmm.
electricians.
Yeah.
And so we talked through it, and we decided to structure a dream list around the agents.
Hmm.
So they went out. Now, again, this could be short and long-term strategy. Like you said, Allie, absolutely. You could call the person on the first run and it's like, yeah, oh my gosh, I've been looking for you for my whole life,
Yeah.
right? That could happen. But the normal isn't. It normally takes 4 to 6 months to really start seeing returns on this thing. So I helped them through the first year of doing this, and they established an agent foundation. And then a year later, so this was about 2 years from the time we started, they went from 6 million to 10 million. They're over 10 million now. And I asked them, how are you doing on your direct side? I just, was talking to them about 4 months ago. And they said, well, we've kind of letting go of the direct side because the agent side is where we're getting most of our business, right? Through the Dream 100 campaign.
Yeah.
So you think about it, there's a lot of companies who want to grow, going from 6 million to 8 million to 10 million in 2 years is not a bad growth rate for most companies. They will take that type of growth rate all the way along. And now with COVID, they're exploding because they
Hmm.
have a lot of the agent base. Now, what they told me was they are known as one of the key players in the industry now because the agents are out there talking to other agents. So that's one example of how a Dream 100 can work. Another example would be some of the larger companies that we got even working together with Chet. We would do this particular procedure. I mean, we ended up with companies like Intuit, for crying out loud. That was a nice big account, right?
Yeah.
So we used to sell consulting services to larger companies, and we'd use this same structure, and our consulting was not, inexpensive. It was $35,000 a month to begin, and it went higher than that. I mean,
Yeah.
and so, companies were paying, you know, 400 to $1 million a year. So we were using this same thing to go after larger structured accounts, and it worked really well.
I just love that. And I really, I can't harp on this enough. If you guys really need help right now, this is an ideal opportunity for you, in my personal opinion. So let's talk a little bit about some of those other things that you've helped businesses with, some of those sales strategies that have worked especially well. So, one thing that I know from just reading The Ultimate Sales Machine so many times is, education is a great opportunity to get in with businesses. You mentioned doing that live webinar opportunity. I mean, having lunch and learns is an example of that. Having live seminars is an example of that. We use educational strategies for just about every client we have. So, is there anything within that realm that you've seen work especially well, or some advice that you could give on businesses who may not be sure if it's right for them?
Sure. I mean, if anybody remembers the show Cheers, I'm dating myself a little bit, but there used to be a character and his name's Cliff, and he was a mailman. And so when they were all Cheers was a place where they all went into a bar, supposedly in Massachusetts, but the set was not in Massachusetts. Um, I've been to the bar; it doesn't look anything like the set. So
That's funny.
it's but the thing is that Cliff would always have all of these facts and figures and statistical data in his head. So they would ask a question around the bar, and then Cliff would come back, oh yeah, the African aardvark, has 2.7 children per every month or whatever, right? And he sounded so impressive when he was doing it. And so education-based marketing is really, the concept around this is pretty straightforward. It's like you're going to educate your client, and that in turn will now position you as an expert. So one of the keys about education-based marketing that, unfortunately Chet has passed now, so we didn't have a chance to rewrite the second version of the book. But one of the things that we definitely want to understand with education-based marketing is it's about questions, not about just barraging people with data. So when you're talking with somebody, you can ask questions on and around what the data point will support. And we used to do this all the time in those web trainings we were talking about. So we would ask questions, like I would ask a question You know, how are you guys following up on a scale of 0 to 10? How many times do you follow up with a, prospective client over a year? Zero, none, 10, at least 10 times, right? And we would go through, I'd ask 3 or 4 questions like that. And then I'd ask them to total it up. And it'd be like, okay, if we ask 3 questions, are you a 30? Right? Are you a 30? Because statistically, half of the time, salespeople never follow up with a lead. And only 13% of the time they follow up with a lead that is more than 3 to 4 times. But the average sale on a cold lead happens between the 8th and 15th contact. So if you're never getting to that 8th contact and you see your numbers, then you're likely losing a majority share of business, because studies like Marketo and other companies that have put out data show that 62.5% of incoming leads will actually close. But if you got a system, because they only close at about 4.67% per month. And that's why you're not, what you're doing is you're educating your buyers, and they're going to buy from your competitors because you're not staying with them long enough. And that's the power of follow up.
Yeah, I
Now,
love
how
that.
many of you like,
Oh, go ahead.
no, no, in the close on the Sally was, now, how many of you would be interested in having follow up training within your company?
To
Right?
me, the ability to ask the right question is one of the most valuable skills I personally think that people in general, but especially business owners, can really do for their companies, because exactly like what you just mentioned, the ability to ask the right question can agitate the problem. It can open the mind of the person that you're talking to what they're missing. And then obviously being able to come back and support your own opinions or positions with real factual data. There's simply nothing better than that, in my opinion. And there is an opportunity for virtually every business to educate their potential clients, prospects, customers, whatever you want to call them. Most businesses, at least that I've spoken to throughout the years, they simply can't see the forest for the trees. Sometimes they miss the opportunity to share with their audience things that they don't know, because they're so close to their own business that they just kind of take some of this information for granted because they've always known it. But the truth is, your consumers likely don't know it. And if they don't know it, they're not going to understand why they need you or why you're a good fit for them. So I think you guys should really, really, really take what he just said and try and find a way to implement that into your business. And you can do it online, you can do it offline, so many different opportunities there. But it's something that I fully support. And just, I don't see enough local businesses using that. You see it very
No.
heavily in the online space, but it's kind of a missed opportunity.
Well, I agree. And even in the online space, that here's the key. When you're educating your clients, especially on the local base, and I can give it a perfect example of when I bought a vacuum cleaner. A guy did this like a masterful. Um, uh, instead of using product data or product data, depending on where you come from, you want to use market data. So, the key is using market data to support the pains, frustrations, and challenges that the person you're trying to persuade with that knowledge is going through. For example, um, should I tell a story about my vacuum?
Absolutely.
All right. So I lived in Texas. This guy was a master at doing this. I actually asked him, did he actually study Chet? At the end of this. So I'm going in. I was doing fine financially, but we needed a vacuum cleaner for the house, and my wife at the time was just complaining. Pay attention to that, complaining, folks. She was complaining about, now that was my pain. I didn't want my wife in pain, right? So that was my pain. So she was complaining about the old vacuum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, well, let's just go get a new vacuum. So we go to this different department stores, and they're trying to persuade us on product data. Well, this thing has 3 times more sucking power than this one, or whatever, they were saying, right? And so we go into this small shop, and he has these high-end vacuums, meal and different types of vacuums. And so anyways, I get ask a couple questions. My wife asked him a couple questions, And he starts going. He goes, "Well, let me show you something." And he goes, he used to use the dust mite story. So do you know that in your carpets, there's usually 100 million organisms called dust mites living in your carpets, and their fecal matter actually gets deposited in your carpets. But when your kids kick around on there, it kicks up the dust. And actually, when you inhale the dust, you actually get symptoms like wheezing, sneezing, watery eyes, runny nose, and those type of things. Do you ever have any of those? And I'm like, oh my God, my eyes are watering all the time. Right? I'm thinking like this. So then he goes on and he starts talking about, the health and the brain power of children as they're growing up when they have these toxins removed from their body, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? He's demonstrating market knowledge and he's quoting places like the Harvard Business, not Harvard Business, the Harvard Medical Review, different American Medical Association, those type of things. And then what he did is he's like, well, would you like a demonstration on the vacuum? Well, I was already sold, but I'm like, this guy's so good. Yeah, please. So he gets down on his knees. He throws dirt on the floor. He shows the two, power of the vacuums that he was showing us during his presentation. He was so good at this. I took my credit card out. This is very rude, but I did it. I have to admit I did it. Took my credit card out. He was on the floor and I just threw my credit card on the floor in front of him. He looked up at me, and this is how smart he was. Folks, when you make a sale, close the sale. This is what he does. Ali said something beautiful in the beginning, that sales is first and foremost in my business, and it should be in any business. So even though I was a bit rude, and I wasn't trying to be, I just thought it was being funny, but it was rude. I threw that. He was smart enough to pick the card up, and he goes, "What color would you like? Midnight blue or this?" And I said, "Sweetheart, which one do you want?" She goes, "I want this one, midnight blue one." He goes, "Okay, I'll write it up." Now, he hasn't told me the price of this vacuum cleaner, right? At all. So I'm like totally like sold. He walks around, he grabs the form, he starts writing it up, and he goes, "Okay, folks, that'll be $916." And now back then, $900 for a vacuum
Oh, yeah.
was a lot of money. Right? But he did such a great job in bonding and building the rapport through using market data that I went, okay. And then he upsold me onto a 3-year warranty extension. So by the time I got out of there, it was over $1,000 for a vacuum, right? This is the power of market data will sway the imagination and build huge rapport and position him as an expert. And that's exactly what it did. And anytime I had vacuum questions, who did I call? Him. And I
That is
sent people, hey, et cetera. Go
that
ahead.
is such a powerful story. I mean, the ability for any person in any industry, even someone selling vacuums that may see it as basic, not complex, to the person who's buying it, all they want are their problems solved. And he actually opened your eyes to problems you weren't even thinking about. You didn't even realize they were connected.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me of a student we had in my program who they did healthy home inspections, audits. They would help people remove toxins, find ways to help them be healthier inside. That's really the exact strategy I was able to give them, sharing them some of that exact type of information. Because the truth is, their audience was actually unaware that their symptoms were even being caused by some of these things in their home. And if that person doesn't connect those dots, they're never going to understand why they need you. And in your case, he was able to make you understand why you needed this even more than you already knew you did, and
Mm,
was able to get you to pay more than I'm sure you were ever expecting to when you started that vacuum sales hunt that you were on.
absolutely. He got me for over 3 times what my head budget was, right? I was there thinking, oh, I'll spend a few $100s on a vacuum. But, again, over $1,000 later, I walked out of there and happy, happy, happy,
Exactly.
happy.
The one thing that I'd like to talk about before we wrap this up is you mentioned that he sold you on that 3-year extended warranty. So a couple of things that I'd love for the audience to kind of think about as we talk about this. The first thing is being able to have salespeople that intentionally offer upsells to every single client to increase the value of your average purchase. That is one simple thing that can really open up your revenue without doing much of anything differently, still getting the same number of leads, still making the same number of sales, but you can increase that size of the purchase. And also the ability to have something that's potentially a recurring revenue offer. Maybe you don't have anything to upsell right now, but finding opportunities to give your clients more of what they need related to your products and services. So I know you probably have a ton of information on different ways that businesses can go about adding on those upsells. Can you share a little bit of, insight around that?
Sure. Yeah. Upsells, cross sells, and downsells, right? Those are the three. As you know, almost every company in the world can put into some type of maintenance or warranty program into their program. It doesn't matter what they do. I mean, if you're selling roses, you could say, look, these roses are guaranteed to be blah, blah, fresh for X amount of days, right? And give them a care package, an extended warranty package on, on their roses. Now I'm reaching on that one, but the
Yeah.
reality is that almost any company can come up, especially if you have a hard, tangible product that actually lasts for a long period of time. Um, and the truth be told, uh, you can add on any type of upsell that you want, but recurring revenue maintenance is great.
Mhm.
But even in the case of a rose, or somebody selling flowers, they can upsell different things. They can sell vases or vases, or depending on where you're from. They can sell education. They can sell a gift certificate for somebody else,
Mhm.
right? A lot of places don't think about this. Somebody buys $100 worth of flowers today. Hey, do you have, a significant other, or do that you also want to support? Mother's Day is going to be coming up in May, I believe. um, for all you mothers, I'm sorry if I forgot what day Mother's Day was on. But when it comes up, right, you can pre-sell that in a gift certificate form so they come back to you. Right. So there's all these special holidays, Valentine's days. I'm going to speak for the male population, because any man out there knows trying to go into a florist on Valentine's Day is a mission of suicide, pretty much. I mean, because you're going to walk in there, the roses are going to be 4 or 5 times what they're normally being charged. They have low inventory, all kinds of things. But imagine if you could create a club where it's like, listen, come in Valentine's Day, you get 20% off anything that's happening, et cetera. It's just an annual fee of X.
Mhm.
Some people are going to take that. A guy like myself would absolutely take that, because now it takes the problem off my head, which is, oh my God, I got to think about all this stuff. And now if you could automatic deliver that on top of that, it
Mhm.
automatically goes out to my mother. It automatically goes out to my, significant other. It automatically goes out to my daughters, right? If we could do that, I'd pay for that all day long, and now you just have this recurring membership going on. So any business can use upsells, and upselling is, okay, you sold something. Now you're going to try to sell something a little higher. Cross sell is basically, I'm going to add on an item that is similar, but it's going to increase the transactional value. And at all case, people go, well, I'm going to walk away from this whole thing. Use a downsell. Hey, if you didn't buy, roses, what about carnations? Right? Because the thing is, and a lot of people don't use downsells, Ellie, because they just don't think about it. But the
Yeah.
reality is, you want to get somebody to consume what you have, because that builds the relationship. So even if you have to downsell, it's better than having them walk out the door and then going to your competitor, because you've already educated them and they're going to buy something at your competitors.
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, that's what we did with this organic course that I mentioned earlier. We had a good number of people who they're on calls with us already. They want to work with me, but maybe they just don't have the financial investment to join my mentorship, work with me in an agency capacity. And in all honesty, if they don't have the financial reach to be able to do that, they're also not going to have the budget for paid ads. So it wouldn't necessarily make sense for them anyway. So the truth
Mhm.
is, I created something as a downsell based on what my audience really needed from evaluating how these calls were going. And the truth is, if somebody purchases this program, it's the lowest investment thing that I offer. It doesn't cost any money to implement it. You can obviously spend money if you want to, but it can be done with no money at all. If somebody's able to get great results with that program, which they absolutely will if they follow it, they're actually going to be in a better position to work with me in other ways. It's going to actually help them get to where they need to be in order to make a larger transaction with us. So it can be a win-win. It's not all about you as a business trying to make money. It can be something and should be something you've actually created with your audience in mind. And exactly like you were saying with the example with the roses and the club, to save money, have it delivered. Two of the best things I encourage people to think about when creating these types of offers is simplicity, number one, and convenience, number two. People, when they have a lot of options, they're overwhelmed. You don't need to offer them everything you have. Give them very specific things that they could need. And then the ability to not have it cost them any additional time in terms of consuming that. So the delivery option, that's going to be a great way to increase the convenience. Having that club is also going to help convenience because, like you mentioned, a lot of men do wait last minute to buy gifts. So if they already know that they have this thing, you could even offer them a recurring plan where you tell them what your wife loves. They just deliver it on these holidays. You don't even have to think about it again. That's perfect for the consumer, but it's perfect for you as a business owner because you're getting more business than you would have ever gotten otherwise, maybe simply because the person forgot. And leaving it up to a busy consumer to think about ordering from you over and over again, you're really hurting yourself because they probably are just not putting a high priority on it, even if they would really like it. So I think that is a great example of how businesses can really increase those sales, but also do something that maybe is unusual in their industry, but really would serve their customers to the very best of their ability. So I think this has been an amazing interview so far. If my audience wants to learn more about you and what you do, where can they go to find you?
They can go to my website at businesssuccessfactors.com and or send me an email at doug@businesssuccessfactors.com or call me directly at 603-595-0303. And if they want to learn how to communicate better, like just have better sales conversations, I wrote a book. It's called Win-Win Selling: How to
Awesome.
Unlock Your Power of Profitability by Resolving Objections by Doug Brown. Um, and you can go to winwinsellingbook.com and get the book. Actually, there's also a free, we call it a mini course that actually comes if you invest in the book. You can get it for just shipping. But the book is really great. It goes through the whole philosophy and psychology of not just how to resolve objections, but why people communicate, what kind of themes do people come up with, things like that actually get the communication stuck. And I give some formulas in there on how to at any objection or anything that comes up as a stall, how you can start questioning your way out of that versus trying to crush that objection and break rapport with people.
Another example of the ability to ask the right question. I'm sure that would be very valuable for everybody listening to go check out. I'd highly encourage you to do that. And Doug, if there's one final piece of advice, whether it's about anything we've talked about today or something else that you'd like to give to the listeners, what would that be?
What you were saying in the beginning, that sales is your it has to be first and foremost in your business. And if you don't have sales in your business, you're not going to have a business very long. So the first step in getting sales is you must be a master prospector. And this is where a lot of people don't really think about it. But, I've worked with so many salespeople. I mean, tens of thousands of salespeople over my career. And I can tell you the one concrete fact that I know is the master prospector will always outsell the master closer. And that master prospector is that person who can go out and create a lot of activity. And the master closer is that person who, in those key moments, can really structure and persuade and be able to close the sale. But the reality is, when you have a proliferation of leads, you will always make more money than you do if you just have great skill sets on closing. So now with the pandemic going on, right now is probably one of the best times, not probably, it is one of the best times that you can actually build your business. And yes, it's going to take a little bit of determination and grit and following through. But the reality is now's the time to put the pedal down. You want to push the pedal to the floor on prospecting now more than ever. Why? Because your competitors are pulling back. they're sticking their head in the sand and waiting for the tide to go back out, right? And the challenge is that you don't know with something like this, just because this is not the first pandemic we've ever, well, I mean, I'm a little older, but it's not the first, you know, tragic things that have happened in our lifetime. I mean,
Hmm.
we've gone through AIDS, SARS, MERS, 9/11, bank crashes, real estate crashes, right?
Yeah.
The economies always do this. But anytime that somebody's followed this advice that they now just put together and work with you, Allie, on marketing, right? Just to kind of move this needle and get the leads starting to flow. What will happen is when the economy turns around, and it will, when the pandemic settles down, and it will, what will happen is the people who do the work right now are going to be top of mind when their clients come around. They go, oh, okay, now I can spend money more freely again. They're going to call them versus any other competitor.
Absolutely. Such amazing advice for everybody listening today. Doug, I really appreciate it. I think that you've just dropped some knowledge bombs on this audience. I really hope that they'll, take you up on your offer to check out that book, see what information you may be able to give them to help them grow their business. And I just encourage everybody out there to really get focused on sales right now. You have to, there is no other option if you want to solidify your business long term. So thanks again, Doug. It's been great. And I'll see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you, Allie.